Frequency 1836-482. On Marriam, Vox Aeterna. The Strangeman's No Access Radio. Episode 1. Catalogue. Hello there, eerie listeners. Welcome to the Strangeman's No Access Radio, and welcome to another day in the Strangeman's Association. You might not know me, but I know all about you. Or I would if I cared about you, which I don't. I'm your host, Jock Tuckaby. Charming, witty, and a certified cool dude. It says so on the back of my watch. I'm also joined by my producer, Holly Greenwall, and Doug, the sound guy. You won't be hearing from them at all, but I just thought that they'd like a small shout out because they're the only people I ever talk to anymore because we live in the broadcasting station. Now there's also Triss, our bodyguard/security detail, but I don't really count her. Now, during this broadcast, I'd like to take a moment to talk to the newbies. You know who they are, the 10-year-olds who just left college, ex-military servicemen, recently disproven academics, 3 children in a trench coat, 300 spiders in a human coat, Gary, all the usual faces that you'd see jumping at the slightest of sounds while walking down the hallway, staring into dark corners wondering whether the world will ever make sense ever again, and the people who keep getting my name wrong. You know, the newbies. Now, I want to take this broadcast to talk to you. Now, newbies, I know this environment can be difficult to get used to, so I want to talk to all of you directly. All non-newbies still listening past this point will face dire consequences. That's right. No TV or video games for a month. I can enforce that, right?
No.
Apparently not. So there might be some questions that you've asked yourself or others after joining or being abducted into the Strangeman's Association. Who are we? Well, we're the Strangeman Association, an organization dealing primarily with the continued secrecy of the paranormal. And also, to answer any follow-up questions, yes, the supernatural, paranormal, anomalous, and generally the things that don't adhere to normal reality like ghosts, monsters, and likable politicians are all real. And now, you have to deal with it too. So sucks to be you! There's a lot of weird stuff in the world, and if it got out that Spooky Joe's kitchen spoons can do some spooky backflips all by themselves, then it'll be all downhill from there, we promise. So, our job here is to make sure we find as many of these strange things as possible and contain them here, away from the general public, and make sure that no one ever finds out or learns too much. Well, it's not my job. I just get to talk to you about it on this secret health and safety radio channel available to all association members and only to association members. Aren't you special? Now, you might also be asking whether all of this is some kind of elaborate joke. No, this is not a joke. We're 100% serious. There is a man called Spooky Joe. We've been hunting him down for years, and he is coming to take your bones. So be on your guard and make sure you say, "No, Spooky Joe, I do not want you to take my bones." That won't stop him or anything, it'll just make him feel bad about stealing your bones. He'll still do it, though. Also, you might have noticed that on the paper you've signed to join the association, it does say you have forfeited your rights and all of your money, and now have to live in one of hundreds of big complexes out in the middle of nowhere, and some have asked if this is a cult. Listen, yes, I know that giving away all your money is hard, but no, we are not a cult. We do that because we have to and because we love you. And also, this place is more of an industrial mega nightmare mixed with office building type complex instead of a, hey, let's go in the woods and make consensually questionable love type complex. Big difference. Some have asked, will I ever see my family again? No. Well, that's all the time we have for questions, but for now I have a list of some spooky stuff that we have in storage, and I'll give you a summarized description of each item, just to let you all know what we're dealing with here. Alright, first of all, we have a bobblehead doll of infamous United States President Richard Nixon. Now on its own it does look horrifying, the ears are too big, it's staring at me with the hatred of 1,000 suns, and it's a depiction of Richard Nixon. Not many ways someone can make that look good. Its anomalous effects manifest when someone pulls the head back and releases it, in a manner known as bobbling. When this occurs, Richard Nixon, the one that isn't made of cheap plastic, has been documented as bobbling in the same manner as the doll. This could potentially have led to Mr. Nixon accidentally agreeing with people, and it's inconclusive whether this effect is the reason why he did the Watergate stuff, and all those crimes. When interviewed on the subject, Nixon claimed to have no knowledge of this manifestation, officially stating, "What the expletive deleted are you doing in my house? A bobblehead, what the expletive deleted are you talking about? How are you on the ceiling? Get the expletive deleted out of my house now." Never knew Jam Jackal was an expletive. As some of you may know, Richard Nixon is dead. And being dead comes with a quickly decaying body no longer in your control and a sweet coffin with a secret security camera inside. So some of our researchers were wondering what would happen if they bobbled the bobblehead now. And I've got them to wait a little so we can broadcast the results live on air. Alright, I've got the bobblehead right on my desk. I can see the security feed from inside Richard Nixon's grave. I'm about to bobble the bobblehead doll. What? Oh my, just what? How did he even do that? What am I watching? Is this real? Okay, that's too many bones for one person. What? Even, how? Oh, listeners, if only you could see it. It's really horrible. Too bad radio is an audio-only format. What? Oh my god, Jesus. And, no. Okay. It's over. It's over? It's over. Breathe. Let's just move on. Get excited, teeth fans, because we've managed to secure a beehive with bees that make Teethpaste. How crazy is that? The bees still make honey, the Teethpaste is just a hobby, a bit of a side gig. Now, the hives we have here were not found in the wild, like most Teethpaste hives, but in a remote farm in Tanjiaduan, China. Apparently one guy found these bees and was like, "Oh, I bet I could sell that," and he did. While average Teethpaste hives typically produce Teethpaste identical to the Teethpaste brand Colgate, the ones we've got here supposedly produce bacon-flavored Teethpaste. I've tried it, tasted more like spiders crawling around my face and eyes and into my... I have just been informed by my sound guy Doug that I actually brushed my teeth with spiders last night. Interesting. Next item is a rusty pipe absolutely covered in gray goop. The item was found in a nondescript alleyway in a small town of, don't even try finding this place, Bucko. After numerous testing, it's been determined that when one holds the pipe in their hand, they immediately gain an understanding of what time it is in, Bangladesh. I'm going to play an interview log from one subject after being handed the pipe.
State your name for the record.
Sarah Remmings.
Good. Now pick up the pipe. How do you feel?
Fine. I mean, it's a bit sticky. Like, is that like some kind of dyke blood or whatever?
Sarah, what is the time?
I don't know. Like 1-ish maybe?
What is the time now in the country of Bangladesh?
It is exactly 6:34 a.m. in Bangladesh.
I honestly don't know what I expected.
Next item on this list is our very own finest friend this side of the world. This little thing can do one hell of a like I had never seen it. Like you wouldn't believe. One time and he piles of as far as the eye could. How many did you... Okay, stop. Doug, it's just a dog. A talking dog. It can't even say that much. He just says dude in perfect English. I don't even... Sorry about that last bit, listeners. Let's move on, shall we? Our last item on the list is a simple red wind-up clock. Not just any wind-up clock, a spooky wind-up clock. We have fun here. This wind-up clock was recovered from the house of one Wilfred Milbanks during a routine check from his nurse. Wilfred was living with a cancer of the lungs. He was not a smoker, and none of his friends were, but still, the cells in his body decided that it would much rather spend time destroying itself than making sure that he could breathe. They had caught it a bit too late. always blaming the chest pains and fatigue on his stressful job and working at an office building for his paycheck. Whenever Wilfred saw pictures of what lung cancer looked like, they always showed it as either a red glow from 1 or 2 of your failing breathing bags, or as a dark brown blob that hangs around your lungs, making everything worse. However, Wilfred had always imagined his lung cancer as an iron chain of viscera and cells wrapped around his body, tightening up whenever he coughed, or laughed, or even breathed, suppressing every bit of relief that he tried to wring from himself. Every time he hacked, or coughed, or spit, Wilfred foolishly believed that eventually he would expel this chain from his body, releasing himself, throwing it all up in one satisfying cough. But he knew that every time he tried, it only made the pain worse. He was still, after all, living with lung cancer. But as he dragged his shell of a body home from the grocery shop, a strange man looked upon him expectantly from an alleyway. This strange man definitely had a face, a body, and many other small details which would differentiate him from other people, but Wilfred couldn't be sure what he looked like. The only thing about the man he knew for certain was the bowler hat he wore on his head. The man asked him how his day was going. How were the kids? Did he finally get that raise? He talked as if he were reading a script. There was no interaction between the two of them through the words it spoke. Wilfred explained that he didn't have a family, that he hadn't asked for a raise, and that his day was going horribly. The man replied, "Old rope around your chest. I know the feeling." It stared blankly at Wilfred for a moment before continuing. "Well, here's something for it." The strange man handed him a bright red analog alarm clock, which reminded Wilfred of an old Tom and Jerry cartoon. He tried to ask the man how it worked, and he just waved him off. Said something about the whole thing being self-explanatory, and Wilfred walked home without a second thought. When he returned home with a carton of eggs, full cream milk, unsalted butter, and a packet of muffins which were sure to make him sick, he examined the clock more closely and noticed the bit at the back, which on a normal clock would change the time. It had words positioned in a circle around the mechanism. Words like 5 minutes, 8 hours, 2 days, 1 week, 9 months, and 3 years. Wilfred was wise enough to understand what the man meant by self-explanatory. He tried to remember when he'd first felt the symptoms of what would become his crushing burden, and had settled for around a year ago. The only problem was that the clock didn't have a 1-year number. But he reasoned that it was better safe than sorry, and turned the dull blade over to 3 years. After he'd done this, Wilfred experienced a second of fear. What if this was cursed? What if he'd misinterpreted what the clock was meant to do? The turny bit was double-edged, so what if he'd actually picked 8 hours instead? But almost as a response to his fear, the effects started immediately. It began with his hair. For the past year it had been shaggy and unkempt. He avoided a lot of unnecessary out-of-the-house activities, but now his hair lay there on his head as typically unkempt as he'd left it 3 years ago. And his fingernails, which he'd chewed constantly out of stress, had grown back into their jagged, wet shape. Wilfred was perplexed. He thought that anything would happen. He looked in the mirror, and there he stood, still tired, still disheveled, still irrevocably himself. Wilfred was almost outraged. He was harassed by a strange-looking man who had given him a clock that did nothing, working himself up over a joke. But at the back of his mind, he knew that it had done something. He knew it had done exactly what he thought it would do. He lay there on his kitchen floor for a while, not eating, not thinking, just lying there in total submission. It took days for him to realize that the lung cancer was gone, having yet developed inside his lungs, but that no longer mattered to him, because either way, there was still that chain covering his entire body. And now it pulled tighter than ever. Now, I've just noticed that description went on for much longer than it needed to. Hey, Holly, weren't you supposed to summarize these things?
I did.
Where?
On the back?
Oh, there it is. Well, now I'm just not going to read it. Anyway, newbies, I want to speak to you again. This new job is something that you may never have expected to happen to you. If you're like most recruits, you've probably been grabbed off the side of the road, shoved into a limousine with the radio blaring the Frasier theme to hide your screams. Don't worry about that. It happens to everybody. Even me. I hear that some other organizations use some gentler tactics. A stern hand grasping your shoulder saying, "You need to come with me," in a firm, commanding tone. Winning a surprise contest for a mansion, arriving only to realize that it was a trap designed by ghosts. Applying for a job, getting into an interview, and getting hired. In fact, you may have already encountered some of the other paranormal organizations like the Church of the Stone Ones, Maxwell's University of the Unnormal, the Claymakers Reunion, the Boy Scouts of No America, or the London School of Economics. And if you came from these groups to the Strangemen Association, then those groups have most likely collapsed, which seems to keep happening to supernatural adjacent organizations. Well, at least we'll definitely be fine. Right? Right. Well, that's all we have time for this evening. Is it evening? My cool guy watch isn't working anymore. But either way, thank you all, new employees, for listening to the Strangeman's No Access Radio, the only radio station. Remember to always count the people around you, in case a new one appears from nowhere. Good night. This episode of The Strangeman's No Access Radio was written, edited, and directed by Lachlan Millard. This episode featured Bronte Thomson as Holly Greenwall, Remus Douglas as Doug the Sound Guy, Marriam Farris as Sarah Remmings, James Clayton as The Researcher, and Ryder Gavin as Jock Tuckaby. Thanks for listening.